What's up, YouTube? I'm Chris. This is Working Hands. Gonna do a 4-speed swap to a 5-speed in my 64 El Camino. I got it up on ramps, but there's a couple things I want to measure just to double check some stuff. I know the spline's different. I've already kind of got a clutch set up for it. So I'm in here in the darkness of my shed. There's no electric, but I got some lights hanging up, and hopefully it'll be enough so we can see what we're measuring. So what we got to do is figure out the distance of the input shaft between the Muncie 4-speed and the T5 out of an S10. Pretty sure that was a 2.8 S10, and I know already I'm going to have to drill these holes out. These are for metric bolts. Now before I do any of this, and you may not even see it on the video, I'm going to take this lid off of here and kind of look around in there, make sure there's no big chunks, because I bought this at the salvage yard. It seems to shift okay, and then what I've got is a attachment for my drill, and I put the input shaft in there and get it spinning as fast as my drill will spin, and I shift through the gears, and hopefully that catches any grinds or anything, and it'll let me know if there's a problem coming up. Because like I said, I don't know anything about this transmission. Years ago I did this swap in a 78 Malibu. You know, clearly the tail shaft is longer, the transmission mount is back further on the 5-speed, and the shifter location is back a little bit. I'm trying to think. I believe on the 4-speed it bolts to these 4 bolts here that hold the tail shaft on. The bracket bolts to it, and then they bolt back here, or sometimes they just bolt here. So it is possible that, you know, maybe this one is up further, which would be fine with me. So I'm going to try to set this camera up real quick and see if I can measure the difference between the input shafts. And on my Malibu that I did, I had drawn up, and I had my friend laser out a plate. It's a 1/2 inch thick. It is steel, so it is heavy. Weight was not really an issue. I wasn't drag racing the car or anything like that, trying to get, you know, minimal weight. But I used this because of the added length. And I know there's a bell housing out there, and I think it's for a Camaro or a Firebird, that will bolt to the small block Chevy, and it should make up the difference. But I don't know, and I know I don't have that bell housing, so I'm just going to use my adapter plate like last time. Okay, now this should just get me close if I can keep my head out of the camera. What I'm going to do is try to lay this square across the end of this shaft. And that looks like 6.5 inches from the mounting surface to the bell housing to the end of the shaft. There's like a giant piece of aluminum sticking off the bottom of these, and I always take a sawzall and trim that off. So that'll be another part of it. Let me see if I can jack this thing up real quick, and I got junk laying everywhere. Okay, where's my tape measure? Okay, so 6.5 on the Muncie, and man, we got like 7 1/16, so it may be maybe 9/16 on the 4-speed. So it is right at a 1/2 inch. So yes, I'll be using my adapter plate. Now the other thing I got to figure out is how much I've got to offset my mount. I would have moved my lawnmower out, but well, that's on my toe. My lawnmower tire is flat. Alright, so I'm looking at about 14 3/8. Oops. I gotta get down here and do it. Yeah. Roughly 14 1/4, 14 3/8 to the center of that mount from the surface where the bell housing mounts. Slide it out of the way. Okay, so now we got to get, that's about the center. So 16 inches. And that was what again? 14 3/8. So we got to go 2 5/8. No, what am I saying? 1 5/8, which is really not bad. And then our overall length, and I realize I'm on an angle here. Overall length of this 5-speed is about 24 5/8 versus 21 3/4. So 24 5/8 minus 21 3/4. Let's just say 21 5/8. So that's 3 inches. Minus an 1/8, which makes it about what? 2 7/8. So my drive shaft has to be about 2 7/8 shorter than the 4-speed. So I probably should be writing these numbers down. If I had a pen, I might do that. I don't know where I've got anything to write with in here. I'm just throwing stuff around. Alright, I kind of sketched this out. I'm in my own light here, but so the top one is the 4-speed, and we've got let's see if I can focus that. Anyways, it's 6 9/16 versus 7 1/16, so it is a 1/2 inch difference. From the bell housing to the mount is going to be 16 inches, but I just realized the problem here is I'm not including the extra 1/2 inch that I'm adding in there. So it's going to be 16 1/2 actually, and that 24 3/4 is going to be 25 1/4. I'll find my ink pen here and we'll make that note. 1/2, and this is going to be 25 1/4. Okay, so that way I know I need 3 1/2 inch shorter drive shaft. So, and I will have to go dig through the drive shafts that I've got laying around and see what I can come up with. And you know, I believe the spline out on the output shaft is the same. Hard to see it. I think that was pretty common. And Muncie is actually what I've got in that El Camino. It's geared so low. It's not really good for highway cruising and commuting, which is what I would kind of like to use it for this summer. And then also, it likes to jump out of 4th gear. So, well, I'm just going to have to rebuild it when I get it out of there. I plan on putting the Muncie in my 59 Chevy. And you can see, maybe you can see, let me get one of my lights. I have 4-speed parts. There's 2 midsections there. One of them's got the idler gear in it, or whatever you call it, the stationary gear. And those are all Saginaw parts. There's a Saginaw tail shaft. There's a shaft, and there's a bunch of parts in there. I've got bell housings. I've got a complete changeover for a G-body to a manual transmission because that 78 Malibu had a 5-speed in it. I've got a Saginaw, let's see, that's my 3-speed, that's my backup because I kept blowing up 4 speeds. That is another 4-speed. I've got a Saginaw 4-speed in my 59. I've got multiple of the cast iron bell housings. I got one laying here, I got one underneath the shelf there. You can't go wrong with a manual transmission, guys. I mean, unless you're slamming on them like I do usually, they're just way more reliable than, you know, an automatic transmission, in my opinion. I've just never had an automatic hold up to my abuse. This aluminum bell housing here, I had to cut this out for a G-body because I didn't have, I had the clutch fork, and the pivot ball goes in a different location than it goes on a standard aluminum bell housing. And what I did was, you can see there's a couple little flathead screws, and I relocated the ball, and I made a tool to do that. I put it up in a mill and calculated it out. Actually, I did it off of a picture, and I scaled the picture, and so it was kind of a mess, but you know, when you're in your early 20s, you have all kinds of bright ideas of things. So I guess I will inspect this 5-speed. I'll get it up there in the shop and inspect it, and we'll go from there. Okay, so I did get the top off of this. Everything looks pretty clean inside. There's a little bit of wear on some of the gears. It is super minimal. I don't think I'll have any trouble out of it. But don't forget, just like I did, in order to get this top off, you have to take the whole tail shaft off, which means you got to knock the pin out of the gated shifter, whatever you want to call it, underneath here, and you got to slip it off that shaft that drives the shifting ears, and then you can slide this plate this way and lift it off of it, and that exposes everything. There's a little material down on the magnet inside the bottom. I didn't bother to clean it off because it was not a whole lot of material, and you know, if I need to, I can rebuild this. It's fairly simple design. But alright, I'm going to show you how I test these. It is not foolproof, but it does give me an idea if there's any major problems in there, especially if I didn't take the top off of it. So what I've got is my cordless DeWalt. I got a big old drill bit, and I've got this piece of PVC pipe, and I'm not 100% sure what size PVC they name this as, but it fits snugly over your input shaft. Not super tight, just snug, and it's enough to keep the whole drive line spinning while I shift through the gears. Alright, it should be in first gear now. While we got it spinning, we're going to slam second. I didn't hear anything too bad. That should be third. It should be fourth. And there's fifth. You can hear it kick down. And then we can go to reverse. And we'll spin that shaft backwards back here. Third, fourth. Let's see, we'll go third, down to second, up to first. I'm not hearing anything that's too bad. Now, I know the drill makes a lot of noise, but I'm also feeling when I shift to see if it's gonna like try to kick me back, or if I can feel it like hitting the teeth grinding or anything like that. So, and this is not put together exactly like it's supposed to be. Underneath here, I didn't put that roll pin in yet, because I wanted to make sure everything was going to work the way it was supposed to. So what I'm going to do is take this back out, and I've got a screw down in there holding that gated piece on there with the spring-loaded ball, the ball detent. So yeah, it's not as easy to change without that shifter. So I'll get this screw out of there, and it was just shoved down in there, but I'm sure it's in a little bit of a bind just because I've been jamming it around. So okay, now I'll put that roll pin back in here, and I'm not putting this shifter back in yet because I don't want it to hit the floor while I'm trying to get it up in the transmission or up in the car. But I'll get it all cleaned up and ready to go back together. Plus, I'll probably fill it through here once I get it in there. It's if you know the capacity, it's a whole lot easier than trying to get it in this side plug, wherever it's at, right there. So I think what I want to do next is get underneath the El Camino and start tearing out the other transmission. There is a rod that goes from the Z-bar to the clutch fork. That clutch fork is not right for a Chevelle. I can show you in a little bit. But the rod that goes to it's not quite right either. It's supposed to go through both flaps, and it only goes through one, so it kind of puts it in a bind. I'm not worried about that. I'm going to fix it. There's just a few little tweaks. I know my dimensions for my cross member once I get this in, and then all I got to do is come up with a drive shaft, and it should be fairly simple with the addition of my adapter plate. But while I got it out, I do need to drill these metric holes out for the 1/2-inch bolts. So I'll get some of that done and we'll check back. Alright, so this is the El Camino, and before I get started, you see I got it up on ramps, and we're going to climb underneath there and see what it's going to take. Pay no attention to my makeshift exhaust. So we're going to have to go to the back and undo the drive shaft from the rear end, and then we should be able to slip the yoke out, and of course the shifter, the speedometer cable, and really there's not a whole lot to it. You got 2 cross member bolts there in the middle, 2 on each side, and then the 4 main bolts on the ears that hold it to the bell housing. Transmission should slide right out, and then now that's the clutch fork I was telling you about. The original Chevelle clutch fork has a divot in it where there's a ball that presses into it. The rod is straight apparently. I'm not sure where this fork came from, but it does work. But as you see, that pin doesn't go through the bottom ear, and it kind of twists the fork a little bit, puts it in a bind. So I'm gonna extend that rod down to where it goes through both ears, and then I shouldn't have an issue anymore. This bell housing is an aluminum one. It's been modified for a quick change for the clutch. This engine is not a hot rod. I don't need a blow-proof bell housing. Yeah, there's a slight chance if I really cut loose with it, caught traction, and then it would cause a problem. But really, it's essentially a pickup truck, so there's not a whole lot of weight in the rear end. Probably not going to catch a lot of traction. So The engine in this is a 350. It's from a 69 Camaro. It's a Z28 engine. I've had some guys tell me that those don't exist, but I know what it came out of, and that's what it was factory for. So it's nothing fancy, nothing pretty. I did upgrade to a dual master cylinder, but it was a used one, so I'm gonna buy me a new one, because that is the 1 1/8 bore, and I'd rather have the inch bore. It seems to be easier to push the pedal down, or so I've been told. This car needs a lot of work, a lot of little things done to it, but we'll get to it in due time. Well, alright, I'm moving right along. I got the bell housing off. Transmission is obviously out. There's a few things I'm trying to tidy up along the way. There's some replacement pieces in the floor. They're on the top side, not the bottom, because there's some thin spots in the floor. And I'm cutting off some of the zip screws because they were extra long. I really don't want to drag knuckles on them. So this is the flywheel pressure plate. Clutch disc that was in it with the 4-speed. This is obviously the big boy. Well, I think the 5-speed clutch that I've got is for the smaller bolt pattern flywheel. So I may have to change flywheels. I've still got the one for it. The only problem would be if the tooth count or the diameter is off, and I can't remember. This is the stagger bolt starter. I don't know if I can get that on there, but that's the big starter. But if it's a problem, I think I've got the straight bolt nose for the smaller flywheel. I can scrounge parts. I'm pretty sure I kept all that stuff. But yeah, there's a few little complications here along the way. Obviously I'm gonna have to relocate the hole for the shifter, because it's gonna be more central and probably further forward. I'm not worried about that. The floors in this thing aren't great. They're not horrible. I've definitely seen worse in that 62. But this hole was pretty large that was in there for that 4-speed shifter. And there was, like I said, there were some other pieces on top inside. So we're going to clean all that up, and if I have to make a piece to patch this up, I'll make a decent piece for it. And then you can see all the holes that were in it where there was patches up top. Not worried about it. This is just going to be a driver. The paint's pretty rough on this. I'll have to get it sanded down, at least get it in some kind of primer. But there's the aluminum bell housing laying there. So once I get all this clutch assembly swapped out, then I can get the bell housing in and move on to figuring out, get the transmission in, do the cross member, and then probably the hardest thing I think is going to be the drive shaft. If I can't find one, I'm going to have to cut one, and I'm not great at that, but we'll make it work. Alright, so we've got the clutch pressure plate swapped out. The pressure plate was the exact same bolt pattern size as the one that was in here. So yeah, and it is the big flywheel, the big pressure plate. So I had no problem with that. Fixed my little clutch rod, and yeah, I cleaned it off, shot a little paint on the bell housing and the fork, which I scratched most of it off the fork trying to get it in and out. I'm going to stick with the same throwout bearing. It's got a little bit of play in it, but I've had way worse and done fine with them. So everything's lined up. I got the alignment tool in there last night and got it all bolted up. Everything's torqued down. So I guess in just a second I'm going to slide that 5-speed underneath here, which I also cleaned up. and see if we can get it slid up in there and bolted in with the plate on it, and then we can start making a plan to cut for the shifter and fix this gaping hole here, and then cross member, and last thing is the drive shaft. So on we carry. Okay guys, I'm laying underneath the El Camino here. This is the 5-speed, and oops, you see my piece of angle. I mean, I've been doing some measuring because for the last half hour to 40 minutes I've been fighting trying to get this transmission in there, and even with the spacer plate I can't get it to slide all the way forward. And then I remembered this sleeve here, this input shaft, whatever you want to call it, this sticks out further than what that spacer plate takes up. And what I mean by that is it hits the face of the clutch disc where the spline rides. So my measurement from my spacer plate, the face of my spacer plate that mounts here, into the face of the clutch disc is 4 1/8 of an inch, and this is greater than that. I'm gonna say at least by 3/8 of an inch, because that's how far I can't get it to go in. So if I can one-handed pull my tape measure out here and lock it in. Now this is to the face of that plate, and I'm already at 4 1/8 of an inch. So I've got to cut off some of this length of this sleeve. I will probably go a little extra just so that clutch disc, when I release it, doesn't get bound up against it and drag. I don't need any kind of metal parts wearing and floating around in there while I'm trying to do clutch things. So I'll get it off here and get a good measurement on it from this base up, and then I'll get it sealed up and put back on there, because there's a bearing that's right behind there, and I think this plate holds that bearing, you know. And then I should be able to get this dude slammed up in there, because I think I've had it really close like 5 times now. I'm starting to get a little bit worn out. Alright, so this is what it looks like when I got the 3/8 of an inch cut off of it, and it should leave me just a little bit of clearance. All I did was wrap a piece of tape around it, use the cutoff wheel on my grinder, and kind of clean this up a little bit. Fresh silicone underneath of it, and it's a tapered seat bearing behind there, so the race and a couple shims came out with it. So all I did was put them in right like they were, and now we're going to get this thing stabbed up in there, and hopefully it'll go in there like it's supposed to with the plate on it, if I don't forget the plate, and we'll be on our way. Looks like the hole is going to be just in front of this one and in dead center, so that'll make it a little bit easier maybe to work with. Being forward, I may go with a bench seat later. I know I'm not really a big fan of bucket seats, especially because I got so many kids, and I wouldn't mind to haul just more than me and one person. So, but we'll see how that goes in the future. Alright, so this is what I came up with for a cross member. A couple pieces of angle iron, some 1x2 box tubing, and what I did was I cut it to the exact length between those two pieces. I had them hanging on where the cross member mounted, and cut that center section out on an angle, and I flipped it upside down and welded it to it. And then of course when I cut the center out for the motor or the transmission mount to sit, it sits like the top of the top of the trans mount sits here. This wall thickness, I don't know if I can see that, it's like 1/8 of an inch. It's too thin. So what I did was weld a 2x4 plate on here, and then marked my holes and drilled, and it should mount right up and hang in there pretty, and misses my 3-inch exhaust, which is excessive for a stock motor. But I don't have a whole lot of light to work with. I don't know if you can see that or not, but that's my hole I cut for my shifter. I measured from the hole that was ripped out in the floor, and cut it from there. I've made a template off the bottom of the shifter, so there should be plenty of room there to get the shifter down in the hole, and it's going to set pretty close to the top there, so it shouldn't be too bad off like down in the floor. And I made a patch plate from what was already in the floor covering, and I'll get it pop riveted in. I'm not doing anything fancy. Maybe later I'll put floors in this thing. There's some weak spots in there, and there's patch plates over top. Like I said, a lot of zip screws holding it all in. So I'm gonna get underneath here and put this cross member in, and I'll probably call it a night. Tomorrow I'm gonna see if I can get a hold of a drive shaft that I need, and we'll go from there. All right, getting her wrapped up here. So I went ahead and just left the S10 shifter in it. I've got 2 bolts holding it in the transmission. I've still got to pull it out, fill the transmission the rest of the way up, and then seal around it and bolt it down tight. I don't know if I'll use that boot or not. I'm gonna leave it hanging on there for now. Eventually I'll change out that shift knob, because there's just nothing cool about that. I got my patch piece cut to cover the 4-speed hole. I may go back with a 4-speed later, so I'm gonna just leave that hole there. It just depends on what I do. If I put horsepower behind it, I'm not going to trust the T5. I'll rebuild the Muncie and fix the synchronizer issue, and or whatever's causing it to jump out. So underneath, that's the edge of my cross member. Let me get past this muffler here, and then we'll so that's how she's sitting on the mount. Went ahead and drilled a hole and hooked up my e-brake cable. I have no idea if that works. That Muncie had the speedo cable on the passenger side of the car, so it's got an extra long cable in it. I'm going to zip tie that out of the way because this has the electronic speedometer, and I think I've got the other piece in another transmission for the manual speedometer. I'm gonna see if I can get that out. If this transmission works, I still got to test it. Like I said, I didn't know anything about it, got it out of junkyard. So this is my drive shaft I found. I had a 77 half-ton short bed, and I needed a drive shaft, and you can see right there that I had to cut this down for that short bed, and it was the exact length I needed. It was 56.5 inches, so it was right on. The universals were good because I changed them, and they're the right size for the rear end. It already had the 5-speed yoke in it because I had a 5-speed in that half-ton. So man, I should be in tall cotton here. Like I said, I'm gonna get it filled up with fluid and fire it up and back it off these ramps, and we'll just have to see how it does. I'll take it down the road, and if it's good to go, then we'll patch it up at the floor and figure out what I'm gonna do with that big ugly boot. I don't know if I'm gonna leave it or not, because that handle is big ugly too. All right guys, it's all back together, all buttoned up. I took it down the road. It shifts good, no grinds, no pop outs that I know of. You know, I've not really put it on the highway. I just down the road and back. Yeah, it's still got the funky 5-speed knob on there. I may do a handle change later, although that is fairly comfortable the way that's set up. I used a big old boot because it covers well, and it moves with that big old long stick. Because it is so far forward, I'll probably have to come up with something long like that. I guess that's it. That was a pretty simple video. I know I kind of cut through it and just did the things without any kind of videoing. You know, I didn't really show exactly what I was doing on it. I need to get me some good mounts and tripod and thing like that. But we're gonna call it quits on it for right now. I'm just gonna try to drive it and enjoy it. There will be some more videos on this. Got a lot more things to fix, tinkering with. I may even do some paint and body, which I'm not great at, but I might throw some of that in there too, just so you can see how average other people are and get by. But for right now, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Find me on Instagram. You've already found me on YouTube. And until next time, I hope you and your car stay tuned.